Good evening, my name is Dave Scott. I'm the campaign director of the Anti-Sectarian charity Know by Mouth. In case you can't tell, I'm absolutely petrified to be filming myself. The camera adds £10 and all that, so I'm filming here today with Twinkl, Scotland, to discuss tackling sectarianism in the classroom. I'm delighted to be asked along to talk about some of our work that other organisations are doing to tackle it and how we can assist charities take on this problem. I apologise in advance for those of you who are adjusting your screens. Unfortunately, I do sound like this. I'm from County Antrim and I've been living in Scotland since 1999, and I very much feel like I'm making an online dating video here, looking back at myself. And all like Tinder, I'm sort of tempted to go, he's not that good looking, and move on. So hopefully you'll not do the same and you can bear with us for half an hour. I know Twinkl's a very popular site for primary school teachers, particularly. My wife is one, and she's very much it's very much get out of jail free card. She uses it quite often, so she was adamant that I did this today and shared a bit of our insight and material with you. So maybe to give you an idea of what Know by Mouth is. Know by Mouth is a charity that was set up in the year 2000 by Glasgow teenager Cara Henderson, and Cara set the charity up after the brutal sectarian murder of her school friend, Mark Scott, in 1995. Mark had been identified as belonging to a different religious and cultural community simply because of the colour of scarf he was wearing. Quite often, if you've ever taught sectarianism or looked into the issue, football is an issue that comes up in society. Indeed, the Scottish Social Attitudes Survey in 2015 highlighted that 88% of people in Scotland see football as the primary driver of sectarianism. And as we go on through this live stream, we'll talk about why it's not quite that simple as saying it's all a football problem. But Mark was murdered simply because of the colour of his scarf, and his killer identified him as belonging to either a Catholic or Protestant tradition because of that. And Cara was profoundly moved by Mark's death. Those of you who are a little bit older, and this is before the internet age, may have perhaps heard of Mark's story, perhaps worked with the Mark Scott Foundation, or perhaps had his brilliant parents, Niall and Judith Scott, come out and talk in your schools about how you rebuild your lives after this sort of trauma. So Cara set the charity up with the aim of raising awareness of sectarianism, because she believed that the man who killed Mark Scott, a young man called Jason Campbell, did so because he was as much a victim of sectarianism as Mark was. He had been brought up in an environment where he was encouraged to hate, to kill, to attack, to not value anybody who was different. And at the very root of tackling sectarianism, like any equalities issue, be that racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, sexism, whatever it is, it's a fear of difference. How do we as people, how do we as children, how do we as teachers, how do we as colleagues deal with people that are different to us? And that's the very heart of what Know by Mouth does. So the last number of years we've been running a number of programmes in schools across the country. We'll talk about these as the stream goes on. I'll try to give you a flavour of what can happen and what you can also do to take on sectarianism in your school or approach it for the first time. So what is sectarianism? It's a good place to start. It's one of these things that can mean lots of things to lots of people. A lot of people often define it in their own terms and to suit their own attitudes. One of the things that we would do in any school that we're in is ask people, do you define it? Because you have to begin by defining what the term actually is. And I would regard it as tensions and conflict between individuals and groups from the same religious sect. Now in Scotland we have Christianity has been the largest religion for a number of centuries now. 1 in 3 people in Scotland today, according to the census, identify as belonging to the Church of Scotland. 1 in 5 belong to joining to the Roman Catholic faith. So that's half the people in Scotland identify themselves as being the practicing Church of Scotland or Catholic, or cultural Catholics or Protestants in that way. And if you add up the smaller denominational, the Orthodox churches, Methodism, Baptists, Greek Orthodox, all these types of things, there's about 57% of people in Scotland identify as being Christian and belonging to one of these sects. So what we're looking at is tensions within that. Know by Mouth don't really begin work in terms of tensions between interfaiths, so we don't necessarily deal with things such as Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, these issues. These are things we've dealt with other colleagues through different strands. We deal, I suppose, with inter-Christian sectarianism and dealing with that idea of, because we have these complex identities over centuries, they can manifest themselves in your classroom with children using languages or words or terminologies for people that they don't quite understand. So sectarianism to us is tensions and conflict between individuals and groups from the Protestant Roman Catholic traditions, and that's our starting point when we go into work. And when we go into schools, when you're teaching in a school, you may very well find there are 1 or 2 kids who have these attitudes, have these languages. Perhaps you don't understand them all, Other cases you may just find none of your kids have them. It may not be something in your life. Indeed, my wife is originally from Orkney, and it's none of her kind of background. She had no concept of this Catholic and Protestant division before I rocked up into her life and ruined it, you could say, by introducing her to that and taking her around Belfast and showing her things and talking about things in Scotland. So first and foremost, it's not something that's part of everyone's experience in Scotland. It's not part, perhaps, of your educational background. It perhaps will not be part of your colleagues' backgrounds. But it may be something it may be, out of 30 kids in a class, it may be something that 5 or 6 have some knowledge of, or words and language and terminologies that they don't know. And school, of course, is a place to explore words and terminologies and things that we don't necessarily know a great deal about and try to take with. So Know by Mouth begin by going in and talking about stereotypes, and that's where we begin. We joke about the idea of what is a stereotype of people, because we just don't jump into sectarianism, because against this context that we've talked about, the idea of not everybody having these views, not everyone having these attitudes, we sort of frame it. So what I will do, if it's myself and I'll ask them for stereotypes of Irish people, you'll tend to find it involves leprechauns, Guinness. I myself was in a boy band, believe it or not. I was in Boyzone before I got heavy, because it seems that everybody in Ireland is a member of a boy band at some point, and that's something you in Scotland need to catch up with us on. I would suspect we laugh about it, we don't treat it so seriously. We look at those, and then we look at Scottish stereotypes. For myself, I talk about the first time I went to a Scottish wedding and realising that all the guys are wearing kilts, and of course I'm the only guy in the whole room that hasn't got a knife in their sock, and how that made me apprehensive. And we talk about it in a way that makes people understand, why do you think you have stereotypes? And some of the stereotypes you get from children can dictate how you will run the rest of the session. So we'll give them a list of people. Sometimes it will be to do with perhaps a Rangers fan, a Celtic supporter, somebody that's a genius, somebody that is an African immigrant, someone that's a qualified teacher, a charity worker, and you get them to sort of come up with these stereotypes, and quite often they're negative or they're funny, and then you try and show them, in our case, celebrities. So you ask them what's an asylum seeker, and they'll draw a picture of someone who's poor, destitute, needing help. We show them a picture of Mo Farah, the Olympic gold medalist who's won all these medals for Britain. You talk about a Rangers fan, Celtic fans tend to draw them that are quite shall we say, colourful, they're angry, they're aggressive, they're Union flags. Rangers fans, when they're asked to join Celtic fans, will draw somebody who's Irish, somebody who will be running about with tricolours, somebody who will perhaps be unclean, dirty, and they'll make fun of each other. Sometimes that can be in a jokey way, but in other ways it masks the fact that some kids won't actually have a very positive view of these, and we try to tell them with positive stereotypes. So the Rangers supporter is the singer-songwriter Amy MacDonald. The Celtic fan tends to be Gerard Butler, who the gentleman in the audience may know because perhaps your partner has made you sit through one of his terrible, turgid films where he tends to put on an Irish accent or an American accent. My wife would do that sometimes and watch it. And not very much of an actor, but his top comes off at some point and everybody seems happy with that. So but what it is Gerard's a handsome big fella. He's the face of Hugo Boss. He's one of the people back in the PASY 2021 bids and things. And what we're trying to say is football fans can be positive people too. So you begin by looking at the stereotypes and looking at the pictures that people hold. Now in some cases we've had children who won't hold green and blue pens. They won't want to touch them. Green and blue is not their colour, it belongs to the other side. And that will bring us into things such as the them and us mentality, the idea that with sectarianism there's always been a them and there's always been an us. And that's something that we explore through our educational things. And you look at themes through the history of sectarianism, why we have it, the dates, the Reformation, why people are here, why you've got a high number of Irish people here, plantations of Ireland. You look at the move as a historical issue, and sometimes we will do that. Other occasions we jump into how do people make stereotypes. So you establish with the children what stereotypes are, and you look at, you explain how they're not always true, and then we look at how do you stereotype a Protestant or a Catholic, and sometimes it's very revealing as to what people will say. They'll assume a Protestant will be a Rangers fan and they'll like certain colours such as blue, they'll come from towns such as Loch Hall. A Celtic supporter will be from Coatbridge, they'll be very Irish, and there are lots of prayers and things involved, and these stereotypes of what people are. And we try to explore why the children hold these and how we can, not so much challenge them, how we can make them sure it's not all of the story, because really what we try and do is make people think about something and not see difference as something to be dealt with. So we offer a whole range of sessions in terms of taking that off. And the good news is if you're taking sectarianism, you don't just have to rely on individuals, dubious individuals like me sitting in rooms filming this to work it out. There's a whole bank of resources that have been put together by the government over recent years. Now the Know by Mouth package, we would offer 3 of those. One would be called Dealing with Difference, and that looks at a number of things. It looks at a number of things such as social media habits that people have, but attitudes. We talk about the difference between facts and opinions. So, for example, you know, do you agree with a Catholic and Protestant getting married? No, that's a matter of opinion. It's not for us to say that it's right or wrong. It's somebody that has to defend their opinion. They have to think about it. And we don't turn around if we find children with sectarian attitudes and chastise them. You just try and encourage them to think about what goes on. So sometimes you begin by talking about stereotypes. You look at how you stereotype Catholics and Protestants. You look at actions and how actions can impact them. And one of the best ones we do is we ask them questions about how do you actually, you know, how do you make sense of this? Well, music is a great one. So you ask children, is it okay to listen to sectarian music? And that can be songs that contain songs with hate about people that are Catholics and Protestants, and songs that can be sung at football matches, so they can perhaps be sung you know, in pubs or perhaps in front of children. And you'll ask people, is it alright to listen to this music on the headphones? And kids will think, well, that's alright because you're the one listening to it. But if you then say to them, you know, would you listen to it in front of children? Well, suddenly they're not quite sure, because they know there's that link between what adults say and what they do. And in terms of sectarianism, that is a massive thing. This idea of, you know, hearing something from adults and using it, and anyone who's taught in the primary school will know at least once a week you have a child using a word they're not quite sure what it means, and you have to try and fill those gaps in for you, because where they come from, that would be perfectly acceptable way to talk about somebody else, but when you're in shared environments, that's perhaps not the way. We've got to think about the use of language. So we also have modules that look at the use of sectarian language, of posting things on time. The online thing's a massive thing, particularly when we go into high schools and do some work. You will find it's astonishing. Children don't read newspapers anymore. They get all the information from Facebook, from Twitter, from social media. Indeed, I was out working with the school today, and teachers tell me a lot of their time is like taken up when people in class post things on Instagram, being abusive towards their students, and they're actually finding that teaching is becoming 24/7 as people post material online, sometimes sectarianism, sometimes threatening, and teachers are sort of drawn in to how you deal with that. So if you've got nil by mouth involved, for example, we would come out, there's no charge for what we do. We're not here promoting anything. Everything we do is done free of charge. So what we would probably look to do is we'd offer you a bank of lessons. It would be a three lesson pack. We would come out and talk about stereotypes, and we talk about dealing with difference, and then we talk about challenging. How do you actually challenge sectarian attitudes? How do you create something around society that makes things better? And with all these resources, we can provide you with lesson plans, with follow-up activities, a step-by-step guide to go through. We have the wonderful lesson plans all put out with Curriculum for Excellence, as we know that that's a big deal for school teachers, and we're happy to share all these things for no charge at all. We're not looking for money for it. We want you to do it. But we also know from work that we do, particularly with Strathclyde University with teacher training, that sometimes people don't feel necessarily comfortable about sectarianism. They perhaps hear words like Fenian or Orange Bee or something, and they're not really sure how to deal with it and how to approach it. And sometimes it can be quite a lonely environment. And also, there are occasions, sectarianism isn't just something that happens, you know, in working class communities or houses. Professional people have sectarianism. We've had football chairmen. We've had MPs who have been caught out using sectarian language and things in the past on message boards and all the attitudes that come with it. So it's about thinking about language and about how people use it and the link between language and actions. Nil by Mouth was set up with that idea of, you know, Jason Campbell wasn't born evil. He, you know, was in an environment where he heard all these words, he heard all these terminologies, and it got to the point that 20 odd years later he put a knife in somebody's throat because he was fed, drip fed this sort of hatred and things that come with it. So how would you actually approach sectarianism in a school? There's a number of really good examples as to how you do that. Our website is www.nilbymouth.org, and what we would have on that is a number of different sort of ideas to how you would take it on, how you would challenge it. And there's a number of schools that we would highlight as beacon schools. So you would get case studies. For example, if you're a primary school, we would recommend St Blaine's Primary School out in Blantyre or Holy Family in Moss End, primary schools out in North Lanarkshire, who work together over a number of years to get their P6 and 7 children. But there's a big thing about sectarianism, and indeed when I work with adults, is the education system. The education system in Scotland is built on religion. We have denominational schools and we have non-denominational schools, many of which were originally set up by the Church of Scotland, and back in the early part of the 20th century they were handed over to the state. Now denominational schools will be just exactly that. You will find there will be religious artefacts in the room, you will find that there's teaching, there's prayer, there will be members of the clergy there. Non-denominational schools are non-denominational, but actually they do have formal links to the Church of Scotland. The Church of Scotland will have representation on the various education committees that go on, and you will find normally they will have a Church of Scotland minister. They'll go to harvest services and all the aspect. Now for Nil by Mouth, we don't see faith as a negative thing in society. We think faith can be a very positive thing, and indeed a lot of people of the most sectarian attitudes would not darken the door of their local church. So we're not an anti-faith base, and I think it's important when you're teaching it to not to sort of make this idea that religion is somehow a bad thing. There's obviously bad things that have been committed in the name of religion, and I don't think anybody hides from that. But it's not necessarily something that is rooted in the teachings. It's something that has mutated into like a tribal aspect, to where people put people into boxes, define them in terms of a them or in terms of an us. And it's trying to challenge children's attitudes. I'm astonished. I mean, recently I was out working with a young fellow who's about 10, 11 years old, turned around and said, I wouldn't marry one of them, mister. So the idea of 10, 11, a child is actually saying, see a group in society, they're not for me, they're not my friends, they're not people I want to be like. It's about making your world smaller. And we try to focus our work, because traditionally denominational schools will draw Catholic pupils, non-denominational schools would attach children from the Protestant traditions. And the world's changing. There's fewer and fewer people going to church. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's the way things are. And so what we're trying to work at is, traditionally people will see that's the Catholic school, that's the Protestant school, and there can be rivalry in some cases, there can be aggression, there can be cases where people will use the fact that kids, or parents have chosen to send their kids to different schools as an area to generate hate and generate problems. And what we try to do, particularly with our inter-school programme, and that's a big thing when you bring together denominational, non-denominational children, just to work on a shared programme. And one of our Champions for Change programmes that we will work on will involve bringing those schools together. We have a nominal pot of money that we can help you have an event, and it's about children meeting people from different traditions and asking questions and learning something, challenging some of their own stereotypes, challenging other people's stereotypes of who they are. Now, 99% of these things we've tried have been fantastic experiences. Children have learned, they've got a lot of it. Indeed, today I've just come back, as you can probably tell from the flustered look, from a trip to M&D's in Bowling, where we took pupils from North Lanarkshire colleges, North Lanarkshire schools, for their celebrations event. And I must admit, after buying 50 McFlurries today, I'm feeling the effects of that. And what it was about was just giving them a shared experience, a shared educational experience, and a shared social experience, that when they go to high school, they'll know people that perhaps are from there. They know these people aren't enemies, they have horns in their head. It's about challenging those preconceptions. And if you go on our website, you'll see a number of schools. Campus Slang has some fantastic schools indeed. I must single out South Lanarkshire as a local authority that does exceptional work in terms of tackling sectarianism. The whole host of schools there and a whole host of approaches. We have a set of case studies you can look at. I would recommend St Blaines and Blantyre. Well, I would recommend Duncan Rigg High School in East Kilbride. They've all worked towards what we call a Champions for Change award, which is our sort of version of an eco flag for people to work at. But I don't want to dominate the whole debate with nil-by-mouth chat. We offer one approach to it. There's a lot of different things that can go ahead. But if you go on the website, you will see some of these schools. The Moss End Holy Family Project in North Lanarkshire is a fantastic one, in that what they've done is they've brought parent pupils together through the Daily Mile. A lot of you watching this will be familiar with the Daily Mile in your school. And what they try to do is bring the kids together once a week to exercise, to run about, to change, to look at what's going on, to just have and it's those little small simple acts of friendship that take away some of the mystique about somebody else, this fear of difference that people possess. And it's something very powerful. I mean, today we met a number of young fellows we've been working with for 2 or 3 years now, and there's 2 guys who are best friends from these 2 schools they met through the programme. And it's just those wee relationships, those little things that are just so nice to see. And they are teacher driven, and they're driven in the sense that when we went into the schools, the teachers perhaps weren't that most confident about tackling the issues, but with the right support and the right resources, they were able to drive it forward and do it in a way that suits them, and also do it in a quite subtle way where the kids come together. They don't necessarily talk about sectarianism. They do the Daily Mile, they exercise, they talk about things 11, 12-year-olds talk about, but it breaks down those barriers in that way because we've had that educational package that's been putting in. Now, there's a lot of other agencies that do that. Nil-by-Mouth is a nationwide organisation. We can work right across Scotland. Also, our colleagues in the Sense of Sectarianism partnership, of which we're part of in Glasgow. So some of you who perhaps might have schools in Glasgow City Council might be familiar with that. My colleague Alison Logan has run that for a long time now. SOS, again, has a pack of lessons that you can run, as is Communities United. And again, the idea is to do stuff in your individual schools, support you, and then perhaps pair you up with your local denominational, non-denominational school to do some work together. We can help you and support you in terms of funding with that. The SOS partnership could do that. There's a lot of lesson plans, resources, all the things you want to do and want to look at there are possible to have that. There's money kicking around to do it in Glasgow, and there's the will to do it. We've had some great examples at Hyde up in Knightswood in the city. You've had Gorscadden Primary School for a number of times, and the wonderful Celine McKinley had pushed forward a programme there, sometimes involving the football clubs, not always football. Now, football can be an interesting thing because those who are familiar with Divided City, which would be another resource that some of you will use, is very popular, a book to read in primary 6 and 7, particularly if you've got young boys reading. In some ways there's a football element to that. a book by Teresa Breslin. Divided City has proved very, very popular in terms of the curriculum, in terms of getting something into the mainstream in that way. And again, that has elements about football and culture and identity, and it doesn't explore it in a sensationalist way. It just kind of holds up a mirror and says there's an orange culture in Scotland, there's a green culture in Scotland, and what do we know about that? And what questions do we need to ask ourselves about that? And what questions do those communities need to ask themselves about how they interact with others? So the football teams can be involved. Now, keeping it away from football is also good, because there's a temptation to them. Some kids love football, some hate it, some would run a mile from having to do football. One of the programmes we've worked on at the moment is one with the Paisley 2021 bid to bring Paisley, the UK City of Culture. It's a programme called Buddies, and it's a photography programme where we're going to see P7s from 2 schools going out and taking photos together of shared things in their areas. That comes ahead with other approaches where we've brought schools together to do work in terms of communal gardens, burying the bigotry and planting new seeds. And sometimes we do the education programmes, but we try to leave at least a legacy when we go into it, and SOS would be the same. We try to leave a legacy in terms of supporting teachers to continue the work, and also to get enthusiasm with local parents and community groups and community leaders and faith leaders who want to take the programme forward and do things. So if you wanted to contact SOS, my colleague Alison Logan is available at Glasgow City Council. You can ping me an email at mail@millbymouth.org, and we can put you in touch with that. And that's specifically for Glasgow schools. That's a programme that brings together faith groups, the football clubs, Mill by Mouth, the City Council, and that mostly operates in Glasgow. The funding stream operates out with. Now, a recent development, the government have invested about £11 million in tackling sectarianism resources, and it got to the point where we're just awash with resources over the years. So in recent months, Education Scotland, assisted by SOS, have put together a package for you on the Education Scotland website that lets you go online and examine different types of educational inputs, and there'll be a link for that, which I'm sure the wonderful Gillian will put up online. So Education Scotland put together different packs from Rainbow Fish, which is something you run in nursery and primary 1. It's a very, very clever way of getting thinking about how people are different and getting an activity driven element to it, right the way up to programmes that deal with things like social media in S5 and S6. That idea about posting sectarian material online, which sadly is something which is really, really big problem in Scotland. More and more people are posting sectarian abuse online. To be honest, there's some school teachers have been caught out in recent years posting abuse online and cost their jobs. That line between going home at 5 o'clock and what you do outside of work has never been more blurred in terms of social media. So we also have sections there looking at how we would work with 16 or 17 year olds and letting them realise that when they're posting this material, they're leaving a sort of digital footprint, a digital CV that you can never get off. Sorry, no, but we have a package that we do something similar with that, and it's about looking about how quickly you can post something and go online. So quite often in terms of the rehabilitation arm of our charity, we would work with young people who perhaps have got themselves into this mess, and they'll provide testimonies about, I woke up in the morning, I started typing things, and 2 days later I was arrested for things that I posted, and that experience and journey that they go on to try and short, sharp shock to say to people that is a consequence to what you're doing, because a lot of people don't think there's consequences to posting material online. So that's the Education Scotland website. It's a whole bag of things. All these resources are free. Please do not pay anybody for delivering anti-sectarian work in your school. You don't need to do it. There's plenty of organisations that can help you, and it doesn't cost you anything. So if someone turns up and says we can do it but it costs you money, don't get involved, because anything that has been good has been salvaged. It's been put on the Education Scotland website, and you can get it there. It's all free of charge. A lot of the people involved are still working in the field. You can get in touch with us. We're happy to provide the information for you. So please do it that way and work it through, because there has been real investment going in over the last number of years to take this on. Last but by no means least, our colleagues in Action on Sectarianism with Youth Link Scotland. They have a portal there that is full of resources and libraries and reports. Very useful if you're a high school teacher and perhaps you're looking to get your students. We would get at least 3 or 4 students a week in touch for looking for interviews or statistics. All the information there is put there, and they can download it in terms of reports and videos and talking heads. There's so many resources out there for you. Our job is now to go out and make sure that you know they're there and know where to find them and know how to use them. So the other kind of thing, the final sort of thing we do is CPD for teachers. We're happy to provide that if you have it. I know it's a very crowded field, and there's so many demands on your time. If you have an interest in doing this, we're more than happy to come in and spend a couple of hours with you, work with you, leave your resources, show them how to use them, try them out, give you case studies. So in sort of summary, over the last number of years, Scotland has taken huge strides in tackling sectarianism. It is not the biggest problem in the world. It's not the biggest issue in Scotland, but it does exist. There's maybe 600 people every year arrested for sectarian offences. If you trawl through Twitter, Facebook, unfortunately you'll be awash of people posting sectarian abuse and issues online. And of course, children can access them, they can see them, they can post them, they don't think about consequences. So what we've tried to do over the last number of years, a whole range of organisations right across the country have put our best foot forward. We've produced these resources here, they're there for you to use. We want you to use them, we want to support you in using them. They're all free of charge. You can find them at our website, www.knowbymouth.org, our colleagues at Sense Over Sectarianism, on Action on Sectarianism, on the Education Scotland page. There's so much stuff there, there's so many good examples, there's so many good items of practice, and actually sometimes it can be very, very enjoyable because it does give, one of the things particularly with young men, it's not unique to young men, but for boys, sectarianism is still something. There's something about fathers and sons and labels and putting something on your head that you walk in somebody's shadow, you walk in somebody's traditions. And I think that's increasingly important as a lot of you who perhaps work in primary school know, you do need these positive male role models, and you do need to sort of help these young guys know about the language they're using, the groups they can get into, the football dynamic, because 1 in 3 of all sectarian arrests related to football, a great thing for people to come to. But again, it goes deeper than that. It can be about attitudes, it can be about how you treat people. We would also focus on consequences of sectarianism. So if someone acts in a sectarian way, we ask the people, well, how does that impact on X, Y, and Z in terms of groups? We also have a special one called Pause Before You Post that we run, which is about looking at just how simple it is to post something on the internet and get yourself in trouble in terms of sectarianism. So that's just a relatively brief, I hope, and not as painful for you as it felt for me. Idea of the work we're going to tackle sectarianism in Scotland, and what we're just going to do now is I understand a couple of questions that I can see dipping up here, so I'm just going to go into the laptop for a second and see if I can answer any of the ones that have been asked. If you can bear with me. It's just a freaky moment. I think I see myself in 3 screens, which is it's not a good look. Okay, so one of the questions I can see here, bear with me. One of the questions I get is from Jeanette, who is a teacher in the Borders. I know you've been to local high schools here. Would you work in primaries, and do you think sectarianism should be approached differently across different council areas? And that's a very good question, because the stereotype of sectarianism is this idea that it's male football west of Scotland, and a lot of people will say to me it's not really an issue in the Borders, it's not an issue up north, it's not an issue in the east of Scotland. It's not something that's really been mattered to that. Now, what I would say in that regard is, it is more prevalent in certain areas, but you can't just stop an idea at a town boundary. You can't just stop it at a local authority area. Last year, I know with Nil by Mouth, we worked in 23 local authority areas. I think with other colleagues working around I think over the last couple of years, pretty much every local authority area in Scotland has done something in terms of raising awareness of sectarianism. Now, if I was to teach it, say, in the Borders or issues where something's pronounced, I would probably frame it in terms of general equalities, that idea about looking at it in terms of racism, homophobia, and maybe doing a little diversion. In those cases, we tend to find a lot of people just ask for one-off sessions, and we can either send that to them or deliver it ourselves. It just lets them explore the issue in greater depth in terms of coming round. And we'd be more than happy to work in primary schools all the way around. And it's funny, there's a question here I see from Laura, which is asked, should teachers look at sectarianism as a standalone issue or as part of wider equalities work? And I think that's a matter of your own judgment and how well you know it. I think there's enough material to look at sectarianism as an individual issue, and that could be historically, it could be the modern context, it could be looking at the roots of rivalry, of division, or it could be something that you look at in terms of a wider equalities remit, so looking at it as how do we treat people differently. And I think sometimes there's a danger for all of us equality groups when we work with teachers to load you up with too much. The fundamental issue of equalities is, why do we treat people poorly if they're different to us? Why are we frightened of people that are different? And I think looking at sectarianism or all these other isms that we've discussed is a good way of doing that. And certainly we have a special module that we can roll out in your schools that would involve you being, we put it in the context of, do they know what protected characteristics are, do they know what race is, the colour of people's skin, what are the differences between people. We get the children to do identity maps, where they all explore their own identities and what is important to them with that. And I find that on some schools, particularly geographically, and we've done a lot of work recently as the first text doing down in the Scottish borders in Selkirk, where I wouldn't say sectarianism is a massive issue. It's not unknown, but it's not, no way, it's a huge issue. So what we did down there was we looked at social media habits. We looked at the idea of they were looking at digital danger and posting things online, the footprint, and we used sectarianism as the case study to show, well, if you post sectarian abuse about footballers or celebrities or people you don't know, how do you deal and put with that? So I do think that's a very good question, asking about asking about the geographical point that, and also the wider equalities. But the answer is it's up to yourself. It's your own values. It's your own how you know your school and how you deal with it and how you know the areas. But don't ignore problems. We have had teachers before who came to us and said, "Well, I'm not sure how to approach this issue. I'm apprehensive." There has been a great culture in Scottish education about not talking about this issue. It's not something we should be talking about because it's not polite. It's only going to bring us problems. I've actually found when you discuss this, you can have a huge impact on people's lives, and you actually realise the problem isn't quite as big as we thought it was. It's not something that's insurmountable. It's something we can quantify now in terms of arrests, and it's also something where we had occasions, particularly when schools wanted to work together. On occasions, you did find there was perhaps one or two members of the community who were uncomfortable about this. They didn't want this to happen, but they were very, very much in the minority in their communities, and I think that was a refreshing change for teachers who were told, you don't want to mix with that school, you don't want to mix with that crowd. And when they did, there was nothing but support, because more and more people are marrying across religious lines now. The way children have friendships and things. There's a really good story to be told in terms of tackling education, through education in Scotland with that. So, I mean, there are just a few kind of issues that people have asked. I see there's another one here, if you bear with me. Someone here saying that Twinkl is her saviour, which is good to know, as we've been promoting for you, and asking questions about what other good examples of inter-school practice would you recommend. And again, I'll give you some schools to have a look at. We have case studies there. If you can have a quick check on the internet, you'll find some great examples. The Divided City programme ran between SOS and Centre for Sectarianism, ran across schools this year across Western Bartonshire. In previous years it's been Renfrewshire, it's been North Lanarkshire and South Lanarkshire, and that's brought schools together to work on drama programmes, and again there's work that's been put through that. We've had a fantastic programme recently in Condorit, up in North Lanarkshire, where 3 Condorit schools have worked together in terms of tackling sectarianism as a kind of project for the year, and some of that's been about looking at the history of it, how did the problem arise, all the complexities and things around that. There's loads of different approaches and loads of different ways to do it. But some notable schools we should recommend: Holy Family in Moss End in North Lanarkshire, fantastic. We've given a couple of links there to stories that they have done, where we were able to actually get European football money involved to come in and run programmes with them and do something about celebrating sport and the joys of it. St Cadoc's and Cairns primary schools in Campus Lang have been fantastic. Again, they used football as a driver, so they've got people engaged in sport programmes with good citizenship, and they've linked in, because they're not naive to the fact that football rivalry can feed in to sectarianism and bigotry. Holy Family in Moss End, as I mentioned, the Daily Mile programme was fantastic, a nice, simple, cost-effective way of breaking down barriers while also hitting other objectives. Duncan Rigg in East Kilbride has been a fantastic school in terms of work. Trinity in Campus Lang, the high school, really good work in terms of getting pupils galvanised to do things. And we've also got programmes for high school pupils. I mean, we can put you through a cell tower programme where we get peer education and learning and the aspects there. We're happy to come out to schools and do work with your teaching base, your senior pupils, or teach your senior pupils how to deliver these sort of workshops. Also, you could go on Stand Up to Sectarianism, which is a site run by Youth Scotland, and they've produced a whole raft of resources for things such as residentials, activity days, about team building and about more learning to work together. Final shout out, Number Mouth run an inter-school programme where we have a pack of lessons that we offer to you, and at the end we secured some funding from different funders that will allow you to have a celebration event. So it's about £500 to take the pupils away to do something nice, to do something memorable, to do something together. And in the past that's been things such as rock climbing, this morning to Wet and Wild and Windy M&Ds this morning for that shared experience. Other kids are doing things in a communal garden. Other people we've had at St Blaine's primary school, an excellent school out in South Lanarkshire and Blantyre, doing really good work there. We took them out to the Kirsway Velodrome. So it's also not just about education, it's given that shared experience and saying, look, you know what, people are different, but that's not a bad thing. And if we can take one thing from all our work in sectarianism, it's about promoting that idea that difference doesn't have to be something you're frightened of. Folks, thank you all very much. I must have been a bit apprehensive about doing this because I'm seeing myself there and there, and so three of me, and I'm not, well, I am suppose ugly enough to be vain, but I've managed to survive that. And thank you all very much. Get in touch with any questions. Thank you to the wonderful Gillian and Twinkl for the opportunity to talk about the issue tonight. I hope not many of you have needed subtitles. To teaching staff, there's only 2 more days until Easter. To your holidays, well earned. Go out, enjoy yourselves. Treat yourself to a wee gym at the weekend. You've earned it. And thanks for your time. And anything you need to know, get in touch with us at mail@nilbymouth.org. Thank you.